help us work with and react to our gradients. Here's the gradient tool. Let's talk about gradient options because you got quite a few. Number one, the gradient that you're using. Now, if you click here, you can choose a different gradient. These two right here are the only ones that will change. This one is the foreground to background color, black to white right now. This one is the foreground color to transparency. Those will change based on the colors down here. The rest are made and stay that way, and we'll make our own too. So we can choose a different gradient, obviously, just by clicking up here. Over here, we actually have an edit button to make our own. We'll talk about that in a minute. We have a mode button actually for, and this can be fun, is using blending modes with gradients. You have an opacity setting, reverse the gradient, use transparency, dither. Now remember, we're working with colors that slowly kind of blend into each other. And dithering is a way for pixels on a screen to be put into these patterns to make it look smoother to the eye. Most cases, you probably want to leave that on. We have 5 different kinds of gradients. You have a linear, we have a radial, you have an angle, reflected, and diamond. Those are the different ones. Let's stick to this one right now. I've got black to white as my foreground background colors. I click on this button right here and go to the foreground to background gradient. And let me go ahead and get out of here. And I think you know what's going to happen. If I click, say, up here and go down to the lower corner down here with the options set the way they are to default, it will completely ignore what was in that layer. I don't care what it was. It's gone forever. It replaced it. So I'm going to press my favorite key in the whole world, undo. I wish life had an undo button, but that, of course, is the Control-Z key on a Windows system, Command-Z on a Mac. Okay, so we're back to where we were. Opacity. If we change that, now there's a couple of ways we can do it. We can drag it, of course. If you're like me and you can never get the number you want, you can click over here and change it here. But if you have this area selected and you use your up and down arrow keys, you can change that this way. If you hold the Shift key down, you can go 10 at a time. Now that holds true for any area in Adobe Photoshop Elements that has an area where you can change a number. You can use your up and down arrow keys with or without the Shift key. Now 50%, everything else is the same. We get back up here again and do the same thing. Oh, you know what's going to happen. We get 50% of the red, the blue, and the green, and 50% of our gradient. Let's go ahead and undo again. Let's go ahead and take that back to 100%. Real quick, let's look at our different versions of the gradient tool. We have the linear, then the radial, and if I come over here, where I start and click is the center of the radial. Where I drag to is the end. Again, based on the 2 or more colors that you're using, we have a radial going from black out to white. Let me go ahead and undo that. This one is kind of interesting. It's called an angle. So let me come over to about here, and I'm going to drag straight over like this. And it creates the gradient clockwise like this until it gets to the second color here. Now, if you have more than one color, this could be kind of interesting. Let's go ahead and undo that. Next one over here is reflected, and it creates an almost reflective look. This works best with like 3 colors, like a dark, a light, and then a dark. So it creates kind of like what you see here. We're only using 2 colors, so it looks a little bit more linear right now. Let me undo that one. The last one is a diamond, and it creates a diamond based on 2 or more colors. Let's go ahead and go back here and undo what we have. And let's actually change to a different gradient. Let's go out of default and go into maybe something like noise samples. These are kind of fun. Pick up this one right here. That's kind of aggressive. Now everything is like normal. Okay, we haven't changed anything. We know what's going to happen. If I come over here and click and drag across, it's going to do that. So anything we do, it's just going to override it. Let's do that again. Let's go across. Now we know about opacity, but how about blending modes? And I'll show you one and play around with these because you can make gradients that could never be created with one single gradient tool. If I come over here and change that to, say, maybe overlay. Now, it depends on the colors you're working with and what you're looking for. You have to experiment here. Now, I'm going to go straight up and down this time instead of left and right. Watch what happens. Well, it creates almost like a tweed. You could never get that with one single drag of any gradient tool. It can create unique backgrounds for you by using blending modes. They're really fun to work with. I mean, they really are. Let's make our own. Let's take this back to normal for a second. Let's come back over here. Now, I want to make one of my own. So what I want to do maybe is choose one that is kind of maybe close to what I want to use. So if we go back in here, you can check out the other ones that are here. Let's go back into default. Let's start simple. Let's say we start with black and white, like this one right here. Now, if we come over here and click Edit, it opens up the gradient editor based on what we did. But the good news is, if you change your mind, you can click a different one right up here. And you can see some have more colors in them than others. So you have two things going on the bar down here. You have an opacity stop, and you have the colors themselves. Color stops, I call those crayons, but they're color stops. If I come over and click black and white, and I come over here to the opacity stop, check this out. If I change that to 0, I am now only using one color. I'm going from black and making a transparency to white, almost like a fading out into transparency. So you can use opacity on these colors also. It's kind of actually interesting. You say, I like that one. It looks just like this one up here. You're right, it is. Let me go ahead and take that back to 100%. If you want to move things around, you can. For example, if you move this little pointer right here, which is the midpoint between here and here, you can change how it interfaces with the colors or the opacity. So if I come down here and click here, I get it down here. That's the color. So I want more black or less. If I do it up here and I am using opacity, I can get more or less opacity. It just depends on what you want to do. If you want to change one of the colors, if I click on one of the stops here, the color appears here. I click here, and basically I can choose a different color. I can do the same thing over here, obviously. Maybe yellow. You want to add a color? It's very easy. You come down here and you click. Now the color of the gradient at that particular color stop is equal to the color that exists there right now. So it's not changed anything yet. And we could, add another one if we want to. Once you've added one, you can come back over here again and, change it to something else. Anything you want to do. Gradients themselves, and some people use them a lot, some people don't use them all that often, but basically what you can do with them is you can create unique gradients to fit a job that you're working with. Might be even company colors that you have to use. Now you have a smoothness option up here, and if you turn that down, the colors get a little bit rougher in sense of how they mix together. Let's say we like this one enough that we want to keep it. So let's change the name here from custom to Andy1. Add to presets. Well, there you go. Let's do one more. If we change the type from solid to noise, this one's kind of interesting. What we can do here is change the color model, use saturation, brightness, or RGB. We can change then and restrict colors by using these sliders. We can restrict the colors here, prevent them from oversaturating. And we can actually add transparency, and you can see the transparency. Now again, if you like this one, you can go ahead and say Andy2, add to presets. You also have a randomize down here if you want to play around with it. You can make these all day long. The good news is, once you save them, basically you have them. They will be in your list as long as you want them for any object that you're going to work with and on any document that you're going to work with. Let's go ahead and close this. We don't have to save it. We still have our gradients. And there you go. Gradients in Adobe Photoshop Elements.